The first time Elara heard the Alpha King's raven speak, the bird was stealing her hair ribbon. It was not a dignified beginning to anything. She was standing in the laundry yard behind the eastern wing of Blackthorn Palace, sleeves rolled to her elbows, both hands full of damp, black wool. The king's ceremonial cloaks hung from the line like a row of storm clouds, each one heavy with rainwater, ash, and the cold scent of royal authority. The other maids had vanished the moment the bell over the north gate rang twice. 2 bells meant the Alpha King was crossing the lower yard. 2 bells meant lower servants should lower their eyes, keep their hands busy, and avoid becoming interesting. Elara was good at not becoming interesting. She had built a life around it. Then something black dropped from the roof, seized the green ribbon from the end of her braid, and shot back into the air with a croak of triumph. "That was mine," Elara hissed, before she remembered she was not supposed to hiss at royal birds. The raven landed on the stone wall above the laundry tubs. He was enormous, glossy, and pleased with himself. The stolen ribbon dangled from his beak like a captured banner. "It is not yours now," said a voice inside Elara's head. "It is leverage." Elara froze. She had heard birds before. Sparrows complained about crumbs. Swallows debated nest architecture with more passion than most ministers brought to taxes. The old rook by the scullery had once spent 3 days narrating the moral decline of kitchen boys. But royal ravens were different. They belonged to the crown, the tower, and the old moon oaths. They did not speak to laundry maids, or they had never spoken to this laundry maid. "Give it back," Elara thought carefully, because speaking aloud to a raven in the palace yard was one of the faster ways to be accused of witchcraft. The raven tilted his head. "No." Elara kept her face blank. "Why?" "Because he is coming," the raven said. Elara knew exactly who he meant before the other maids began bowing on the far side of the yard. Alpha King Cassian entered through the archway as though the stones had moved aside out of respect rather than architecture. He wore black riding leathers and a dark coat cut with silver at the cuffs, his hair wind-tossed, his face set in the expression that made courtiers remember urgent appointments elsewhere. He was not the largest man Elara had ever seen, but he occupied space like a drawn blade. The raven launched from the wall and landed on his shoulder. Elara looked down at the wet cloak in her hands. She could still be invisible. She had done it before. She could stand still, keep her face empty, and survive whatever this strange bird intended. Then the raven said, with deep satisfaction, "He has been staring at you for 7 minutes!" The cloak slipped an inch in her grip. Cassian stopped 3 paces away. His silver-gray eyes moved from the line of cloaks to Elara's face, then to the ribbon hanging from his raven's beak. "Morkant," the king said. The raven puffed up. "He uses that tone when he wants to pretend he is in control. It has never worked on me." Elara pressed her lips together so hard they ached. Cassian's gaze sharpened. "You find something amusing?" "No, Your Majesty." Elara made her voice level. "Your raven has taken my ribbon." "So I see," Morkant added inside her head. "He took it because you were taking too long." Elara did not look at the bird. Looking at the bird would be fatal. Cassian lifted one gloved hand. Morkant placed the ribbon in his palm with theatrical reluctance. The king held it out to Elara. She stepped forward just far enough to take it. Their fingers did not touch. She made certain of that. Even so, she felt the heat of his hand through the narrow space between them, an unreasonable warmth in the cold laundry yard. "Thank you, Your Majesty." "The palace laundry has been delayed this week," Cassian said. Every maid in the yard went still. Elara looked at the line of perfectly washed cloaks behind her. They had worked until midnight. There had been no delay. Morkant made a low, delighted sound. "This is false. He inspected the delivery schedule this morning because he wanted a reason to come here. He rejected 3 better reasons because they sounded needy." Elara stared at the king's left shoulder, not at his face. "The storm slowed the drying," she said. "The ceremonial cloaks will be ready before evening bell." Cassian's expression did not change. "Good." "He does not care about the cloaks," Morkant said. He has never cared about a cloak in his life. Elara swallowed a laugh. It tried to escape anyway, a tiny breath through her nose. Cassian heard it. Of course he heard it. He was an Alpha King. He probably heard spiders making legal arrangements in the walls. His eyes returned to her. Your name? Morcant leaned toward her. He practiced that question in the glass. Elara bit the inside of her cheek. Elara Wren, Your Majesty. Something moved in Cassian's face. Not a smile, nothing so careless. But the severe line of his mouth changed by the smallest fraction, as if her name had landed somewhere he had not prepared for. Wren, Morcant said. A bird name. I approve. He approves too, but he is currently pretending names are an administrative matter. Elara Wren, Cassian repeated. Yes, Your Majesty. He nodded once, turned, and crossed the yard with the same measured stride that made guards straighten and servants vanish. Morcant stayed on his shoulder until the archway. Then the raven looked back. 7 minutes, Morcant said again. Elara tied her ribbon back into her braid with wet fingers and a face so carefully neutral it hurt. Only after the king disappeared did Brinna, the oldest laundry maid, let out the breath she had been holding. Moon spare us, Brinna whispered. What did he want? Elara looked at the wet cloaks, the empty archway, and the black feather Morcant had left on the rim of the laundry tub. The cloaks, Elara said. She did not laugh until she was alone in the linen room, and even then she muffled it in a stack of clean towels. Elara had been hearing birds since she was 6 years old. The first had been a starling trapped in the chimney of her mother's cottage, furious about soot and human incompetence. Elara had freed it, explained what she had heard, and watched her mother's face go still with fear. After that came the rules. Do not tell neighbors. Do not answer birds where people can see. Do not repeat secrets. Learn from wings. People feared gifts that did not ask permission. Elara had learned to nod, lower her gaze, and let the world think she was ordinary. When her mother died and the palace took on extra laundry hands, Ordinary kept her fed. Ordinary gave her a cot in the servants' attic, 2 meals a day, and work that asked only for strong hands and silence. Silence had always been her safest skill. Morcant ruined it in less than a week. On Monday, he dropped a silver cufflink into her laundry basket. Return this, Morcant said from the high window ledge. It will require you to walk past the west corridor at the 5th bell. Elara picked up the cufflink. This belongs to the king. Obviously. Why do you have it? Elara asked him silently. Because his sleeve was unguarded. That is theft. That is strategy. She should have given it to the head steward. Instead, because she was apparently more foolish than she had previously believed, she walked to the west corridor at 5th bell. Cassian was there, speaking with his beta, Rowan Vale, a dark-haired man whose permanent expression suggested that serving the king was less a position than a long medical condition. Cassian stopped speaking when he saw her. Morcant clicked his beak from the carved back of a chair. He knew you would come. He checked this corridor twice. Rowan knows. Rowan is tired. Rowan glanced at the raven, then at Cassian, then at Elara's hand. Your Majesty, Elara said, holding out the cufflink. I believe this is yours. Cassian took it. This time his fingers brushed hers. Only for a second. It was still long enough for Elara to feel the pulse in his hand jump. His heart is doing the loud thing, Morcant announced in her head. Embarrassing for a king. Elara coughed into her sleeve. Rowan's eyes narrowed slightly. He had the look of a man noticing pieces of a problem. Cassian fixed the cufflink without looking down. Thank you. Of course, Your Majesty. She turned to leave. Wren, Cassian said. She stopped. Yes? His face was composed. His shoulders were square. His voice had the calm of a man declaring law. The Eastern linen inventory has been inaccurate. Morcant gave a croak that sounded suspiciously like laughter. No, it has not. Elara folded her hands. Has it? It may require review, Cassian said. By a laundry maid? Rowan looked away. His mouth twitched once. Cassian held her gaze. You work in the laundry. I do. Then you would know linen. That is technically true. Morcant fluffed his wings. This is the worst courtship I have ever watched, and I once saw a stable boy give his beloved a potato with a bite already taken from it. Elara could not stop the smile this time. She looked down quickly, but not quickly enough. Cassian saw it. For a heartbeat, his severity softened. The change was so small a courtier would have missed it. Elara did not. She had spent her life observing things without appearing to observe them. It was one of the few advantages of being ignored. "Tomorrow morning," Cassian said. "The inventory." "As you command." She escaped the corridor with the steady dignity of a woman who had not just been invited to inspect fictional linen by a king whose raven considered him romantically incompetent. Behind her, Morcant said, "Progress. Poorly executed, but progress." By Wednesday, everyone in the servants' hall had noticed that the Alpha King's raven had taken an interest in the laundry. No one had noticed he had taken an interest in Elara. The palace knew how to see rank. It did not know how to see quiet. Morcant appeared while she scrubbed cuffs, folded linen, and carried baskets through narrow stone halls. He stole a button from her sleeve, a scrap of bread from her breakfast, and once an entire sock that did not belong to her. "Why?" Elara demanded under her breath as he sat on the laundry roof, with the sock beneath one claw. "He will ask why his raven has a sock," Morcant said. "And then? You will say something clever. I will say I don't know why royal birds steal socks." "Acceptable. He likes when you are dry." Elara wrung out a chemise with unnecessary force. "Stop reporting what he likes." "No." The real trouble was that Morcant's reports were not always funny. Some were small and warm in ways Elara did not know what to do with. "He noticed you favor your left hand after lye work," the raven told her one morning. "He ordered salve sent to the laundry shelf." The salve appeared before dawn, wrapped in plain cloth with no note. It was excellent salve, the sort used by riders and sword hands, not laundry maids. Elara rubbed it into the cracks across her knuckles and hated how much comfort could fit inside such a small jar. When Cassian came to the laundry yard later that day, Morcant landed on the line post first. "He has decided not to ask about your hands," the raven reported. "Good," Elara thought. "He will ask about the weather. Why?" "Because he is brave in battle and useless in conversation." Cassian entered with no cloak this time, only a dark shirt and a formal coat open at the throat. He looked less like a monarch and more like a man who had not slept enough. Somehow that was worse. "The weather has turned," he said. Elara, pinning sheets to the line, paused. The sky was a flawless pale blue. Morcant sighed. "There it is." "It has," Elara said solemnly. Cassian's gaze flicked to her hands. She had wrapped 2 fingers in linen strips to protect the worst cracks. "The work is hard in winter," he said. "Most work is hard in winter, Your Majesty." "You have salve?" "Someone left some." "Good. Subtle," Morcant said. "No one could possibly track that benevolence back to you except everyone with eyes, memory, or a functional beak." Elara lowered her head. Cassian took one step closer. Not improper, but enough that the air changed. People spoke often of alpha presence as though it were only fear, dominance, command. Elara felt something else beneath his. A held tension. A man standing inside an invisible circle he had drawn years ago and never stepped out of. "You are not afraid of me," Cassian said. The line between question and statement was thin. Elara considered the correct answer. "Yes, Your Majesty would be safe. No, Your Majesty would be foolish." The truth sat somewhere stranger. "I am aware of you," she said. His eyes sharpened. "That is not the same." "No." Morcant went very still on the post. For once, he said nothing. Cassian looked at her as if she had given him a puzzle in a language he had almost forgotten. "Most people choose afraid. Most people are trying to survive court. And you? I am trying to survive laundry." His mouth moved. It was not a smile. It was close enough that Morcant whispered, reverent and delighted, "A near miracle." Elara had to turn away. The North Tower was colder than the rest of the palace. Servants avoided it unless ordered. The tower rose above the old wing, black stone against the mountain sky, its windows narrow, its staircase endless. The royal ravens nested there in deep shelves cut into the stone. It smelled of wind, feathers, old rain, and secrets. Elara was sent there with washed window hangings on a Thursday evening. She knew Cassian had arranged it, because Morcant landed on her basket halfway up the stairs. He chose the least suspicious errand, Morcant said. It is still suspicious. The hangings are actually clean, Elara thought back. He is learning. Or you are. I require no improvement. At the top of the tower, the door stood open. Cassian was inside at a long table covered in maps, wax seals, and border reports. The fire had burned low. A cup of tea sat untouched near his hand. He did not look like a king in that moment. He looked like a man who had spent too long reading bad news by candlelight. Elara stopped just inside the room. "Your Majesty! The hangings!" He looked up. The severity returned first, out of habit. Then he saw it was her, and something in his shoulders eased before he could stop it. Morcant, perched near the rafters, said quietly, "He does that every time." Elara set the basket near the window. "Shall I replace them now?" "No, it can wait." The correct response was to curtsy and leave. Instead, she looked at the untouched tea, the ink smudged at the edge of his hand, the faint shadows beneath his eyes. The North Tower wind pressed against the windows as though trying to get in. "When did you last sleep?" she asked. Cassian went very still. Morcant clicked his beak once. "Oh, direct. Excellent. That is not a question servants ask kings," Cassian said. "No," Elara agreed. "It is a question people ask people." The silence that followed did not feel dangerous. It felt exposed. He leaned back from the map. "You speak very plainly for someone who tries very hard not to be noticed." Elara's fingers tightened around the folded cloth in her hands. "Not being noticed does not mean not seeing." His gaze held hers. There it was again. The man beneath the crown, tired and too careful, looking at her as though she kept placing truths on the table that no one else had brought him. "The council wants a marriage alliance," Cassian said after a moment. Elara's chest tightened. She hated that it did. She had known, of course. Kings married for borders, bloodlines, influence. Laundry maids did not get opinions about that. "Is that what you want?" Morcant made a low sound. "He wants to throw the entire council out a window. This is not considered policy." Cassian looked toward the dark glass. "What I want has rarely been the point. That seems a poor way to rule." His eyes came back to her, sharp with surprise. She should have apologized. She did not. "If the king's wishes never matter," Elara said, "then the council is ruling and using your face for it." Morcant spread his wings slightly. "I have said this for years. No one listens because I eat wax seals." Cassian's laugh was so quiet she almost missed it. Not the court laugh, if he had one. Not a polished social sound. A small, unwilling breath of amusement that escaped before he could lock it away. It changed his face more than any crown ever could. Elara felt something in her chest move in response, inconvenient and warm. "You should be careful," he said. "I usually am. Not with me. Perhaps you need someone who isn't." Morcant said nothing for a long time after that. When Elara left the tower, she carried the empty teacup with her. Cassian had finished it while she replaced the hangings. She did not mention it. Neither did he. After that evening, Cassian stopped inventing quite so many errands, but not enough to preserve his dignity. He appeared in the lower garden to return a glove Morcant had stolen. He paused in the old stone passage near the kitchens to ask whether the laundry received enough firewood. He stood outside the linen room once, saw Brenna inside, and continued walking as though the wall beyond it had been his destination all along. Each time, Morcant reported the truth with the solemn duty of a town crier. He is not interested in herb storage. He wore the coat with the silver cuffs because you looked at it last time. He says no when he means he knows exactly what is happening. Elara grew dangerously good at not laughing. Once, in the lower garden, Cassian held out her stolen glove and said, "My raven has poor manners." "Your raven has an organized campaign," Elara answered before she could stop herself. Cassian's eyes narrowed, but not in anger. "A campaign." Morcant puffed up with pride. Finally, recognition. Elara slid the glove back onto her hand. "He seems purposeful." "Morcant has always considered himself purposeful," Cassian said. "Because I am," the raven added. "He is very loyal to you," Elara said. Cassian looked toward the bird. "He is very intrusive." Loyalty often is. That landed somewhere. Elara had begun to learn the small movements of him, the tightening of his jaw, the lowering of his guard near Morcant, the way his attention returned to her even when duty pulled it elsewhere. It was dangerous knowledge, because she was beginning to want more of it. The palace noticed eventually. Palaces always did. They noticed in glances first, a maid whispering as Elara passed, a steward pausing when Morcant rode her laundry basket as if it were a royal carriage, Brinna asking whether Elara had angered or charmed the tower birds. Elara answered that birds were beyond human explanation, which was true enough to survive. The council noticed at the winter candle feast. Elara should not have been in the great hall, except along the wall with the other lower servants. She wore a plain gray dress, a white apron, and her hair braided tightly enough to make her scalp ache. She carried wine pitchers from kitchen to sideboard and kept her eyes on the floor. Cassian sat at the high table beneath the black banners of House Veyre. He looked carved from winter, formal and remote. At his right sat Lord Varric Thorn, the oldest voice on the royal council, and the kind of man who seemed to have been born disapproving. His daughter, Lady Seraphine, sat near him in blue silk, beautiful, composed, and clearly positioned where everyone could imagine her beside a throne. Elara understood the message. Everyone did. Morcant, who had been banned from the feast after stealing a sugared plum from the ambassador of Greymere, entered through a high window anyway. "This gathering is dreadful," Morcant announced in Elara's mind. "The tall woman in blue has laughed at 3 things that were not funny. Varric smells of sealed letters and smugness. Cassian has looked at you 9 times. Elara nearly overfilled a goblet. "Leave," she thought. "No," Morcant said. The raven swooped over the high table, ignored Cassian's outstretched arm, and landed on Elara's shoulder. The hall went quiet. First the nearest servants stopped breathing. Then a noblewoman murmured. Then one of the counselors dropped a spoon. Silence spread outward until even the musicians faltered. Royal ravens did not land on laundry maids. Elara stood perfectly still with a wine pitcher in one hand and the most politically inconvenient bird in the kingdom on her shoulder. "He looks alarmed," Morcant observed. "Not for himself." "For you, this is progress of an inconvenient kind." Cassian rose. Before he could speak, Lord Varric rose too. "Remarkable," Varric said. His voice was smooth, and all the more unpleasant for it. A royal raven showing such familiarity with a servant. Elara lowered her gaze. "My lord, do you have training with birds, girl?" "No, my lord." "No? Yet the king's own raven leaves his shoulder for yours." Morcant clicked his beak. "I leave his shoulder whenever I like. It builds character." Elara could not answer that. Varric stepped down from the dais. "There are old practices in the border villages, bird charms, feather workings, low magic used by low people who wish to climb higher than their station." The words moved through the hall like frost. Cassian's voice cut across it. "Enough." The hall seemed to shrink around that single word. Varric bowed his head, but his eyes remained on Elara. "Your Majesty, I speak only from concern. The royal ravens are bound to the crown. If one can be influenced by a laundry maid, what else has she influenced?" Morcant's claws tightened on Elara's shoulder. "He is baiting him. Do not let Cassian take it." Elara's heart beat hard against her ribs. Cassian descended from the dais. The nobles shifted back without realizing they had done it. His face was a mask of controlled fury, and for one breath Elara wanted nothing more than to step behind him and let that fury shield her. But if he crushed Varric now, everyone would remember only that the king had protected a strange maid from questions no one had answered. They would call it proof. Elara raised her eyes just enough to meet Cassian's. He stopped. It cost him. She could see that. The wolf beneath his skin, silent until now, flared gold through his eyes before he forced it down. She gave the smallest shake of her head. Morkant whispered, "He hates this." Elara knew. Varric saw the exchange and smiled. "A hearing, then, before the council. Let the matter be examined properly. If she is innocent, surely she has nothing to fear." That was one of the great lies of powerful men, Elara thought. They always said the innocent had nothing to fear while building rooms designed to frighten them. Cassian's jaw tightened. "Tomorrow. Tonight," Varric said. "Before any evidence can be disturbed." There it was. Too eager. Too prepared. Morkant went very still. His voice changed from theatrical bird to watchful creature of the tower. "He has brought something," the raven said. "What?" Elara asked silently. "A lie in paper." Elara set down the wine pitcher. Every eye in the hall followed the movement. "Tonight is acceptable," she said. Cassian looked at her. So did Varric. So did every person who had thought a laundry maid would lower her head and tremble. Elara was trembling. She simply refused to let them have the satisfaction of seeing it. The council chamber was colder than the North Tower. The room was long, dark, and polished by generations of people who mistook discomfort for authority. Elara stood in the center of the floor. Cassian stood at the head of the table, refusing the throne-like council chair, his hands resting on the carved wood and his eyes fixed on Varric. Morkant perched on the back of a chair near Elara. 7 other ravens lined the high window ledge. No one commented on them. That was wise. Varric placed a folded letter on the table. "This was intercepted by one of my men near the western gate. It bears markings used by the Red Fen Pack, known rivals to our border interests." A murmur passed through the council. "The contents," Varric continued, "suggest that a servant within Blackthorn Palace has been passing observations of the king's movements through birds." Elara looked at the letter. Morkant said, "The ink is wrong. Too fresh. Also, he stores his private seal behind the loose stone in the East Records alcove. I have been waiting for someone worth telling." Elara's pulse steadied. Fear did not leave her. It changed shape. Varric turned to her. "Do you deny you can influence ravens?" "Yes," Elara said. "You deny it?" "I deny influence, not hearing." The chamber went silent. Cassian's head turned slightly. Morkant made a pleased sound. "There," the raven said. "Good. Truth is sharper." Varric's eyes gleamed. "So you admit unnatural dealings?" "I admit I can hear them." A councilwoman made the old moon sign. Another leaned forward with open curiosity. Rowan looked as though several things had just become clear, and none improved his evening. "Since when?" Varric asked. "Since I was a child." "And you concealed this from the crown?" Elara looked at the men and women around the table. Fine wool, old rings, family crests, faces trained to hide fear beneath judgment. "People are rarely kind to what they do not understand," she said. "Low people learn that early." Something moved through Cassian's expression. Not pity. Recognition. Varric seized the moment. "Then you admit deception." "I admit survival." Morkant croaked loudly. One of the younger counselors flinched. Varric pointed at the bird. "And that creature speaks to you now?" "Yes." "Convenient. Often inconvenient." Rowan covered his mouth with one hand. Cassian did not smile, but his eyes warmed. Varric's patience thinned. "Tell us then, Maid. What does the raven say?" Elara looked at Morkant. Morkant spread his wings, black against the candlelight. "Tell them, I say Lord Varric's left sleeve smells of the red wax used on the forged letter, and that he should have washed both hands, not only the right." Elara repeated it. The chamber erupted. Varric went pale, then red. "Absurd." Cassian's gaze dropped to Varric's sleeve. "Approach," the king said. Varric stiffened. "Your Majesty." "Approach." The command carried the old alpha weight. Even counselors who did not move seemed to bow internally beneath it. Varric stepped forward. Rowan inspected his sleeve. His expression changed. He lifted a fleck of dark red wax from the cuff. "Red wax," Rowan said. Varric recovered quickly. "Half the court uses red wax." "Not this one," Morcant said. "This one has pine ash mixed into it. He thinks that makes it harder to trace. It makes it taste worse." Elara repeated that too. Rowan gave the wax a cautious sniff. "Pine ash!" The first crack opened in the room. The council had expected fear. They had not expected details. Varric's mouth tightened. "Parlor tricks." "No," Elara said. "Witness testimony. From birds. From witnesses you did not think mattered." Morcant hopped onto the table. He dropped something small and dark onto the polished wood. A seal. The room stilled. Varric stared at it. Cassian reached for the object. "Your private mark, Lord Varric." "Stolen," Varric snapped. "From where?" Elara asked. His eyes cut to her. "Was it stolen from your writing desk?" she asked. "Your document case? Or from behind the loose stone in the East Records alcove where Morcant says you hide things you do not want your household to know about?" Varric did not answer fast enough. That was enough. Cassian looked to Rowan. "Search it!" Varric took one step forward. "Your Majesty, this is an outrage!" Cassian's voice was very soft. "It is becoming one." Rowan left with 2 guards. The waiting was the worst part. Varric filled it with words. He spoke of superstition. Servants rising above their places. "I know how much can be hidden in dirty cloth. I know who bleeds, who lies, who pretends not to be afraid, and who thinks servants have no memories. I know the palace from below, my lord. You should have been more careful where you dropped your stains." Morcant made a sound of pure approval. "Excellent. Strong imagery. Laundry-based justice." A laugh broke from somewhere down the table. It died quickly, but not before the room changed again. Varric had expected shame to silence her. Instead, her shame had learned to speak. Elara turned to the council. "I never commanded the ravens. I only did what this court forgot how to do. I listened." No one answered. Cassian released Varric's wrist. 2 guards took the lord by the arms. Varric tried to pull himself upright, to gather dignity around him like a cloak, but dignity did not settle well on exposed treason. "Lord Varric Thorn," Cassian said, "you are stripped of your council seat pending full judgment. Your correspondence, properties, and household records will be seized before dawn. Any who assisted you may come forward before sunrise and be heard with mercy. After sunrise, they will be found." No one doubted the last part. Varric was taken from the room. For a moment, the council chamber held only the crackle of candles and the shifting of raven claws on stone. Then Councilwoman Marrow, the one who had made the moon sign earlier, stood. She was an older woman with iron-gray hair and a face like weathered oak. "Miss Wren," she said. Elara braced. The woman bowed her head. "Not deeply, not theatrically. Enough. This council owes you an apology." The words moved through Elara more slowly than accusation had. Morcant knew what to do with them. "Accept. Make them uncomfortable. It is good for them." "Thank you," Elara said. Another counselor cleared his throat. "The Crown has old records of raven listeners. I thought them myth." "Many useful things are called myth by people who do not need them yet," Marrow said. Cassian looked down the table. "Then the records will be opened." He turned toward Elara. Every person in the chamber watched him do it. Elara suddenly understood that this was the moment he had avoided for weeks. The moment when private warmth became public risk. He did not avoid it. He crossed the room and stopped beside her, not in front of her, not shielding her from the council as if she were fragile, but beside her, shoulder aligned with hers. "Elara Wren is under the protection of the Crown," Cassian said. Morcant rustled. "Good beginning." "Needs more honesty." Cassian's jaw tightened, but he continued. "Her ability will be recognized as service to Blackthorn. She will no longer work in the laundry." Elara blinked. That part was new. She will take charge of the North Tower Ravens and all winged messages brought to the crown. Her title will be Keeper of the Ravens until the old name can be confirmed from the records. The council murmured. Your Majesty, one man said carefully. Such a position would place a former servant near sensitive matters. Cassian's eyes cut to him. A former servant just uncovered treason while sensitive men failed to notice it. The man closed his mouth. Morcant bobbed his head. Better. Cassian looked at Elara then, and the room seemed to fade at the edges. She is not beneath this court. She heard the truth when every noble in this room mistook silence for loyalty. Elara's throat tightened. That would have been enough. It was already too much. Then Morcant hopped between them and announced, He also loves her. Loudly. Terribly. With no strategy. The silence was absolute. Elara stared at the raven. Cassian stared at the raven. Rowan, behind them, closed his eyes like a man who had been expecting this disaster and was relieved to have it over with. Morcant looked pleased. What? It was relevant. Elara's laugh escaped before she could catch it. Not a polite laugh, not a servant's safe laugh. A real, helpless sound that filled the council chamber where she had been accused of witchcraft less than an hour before. Cassian looked at her laughing in front of his council, in front of the old banners and the ravens and the evidence of treason, and something in his face changed completely. The cold king did not vanish. He opened. Morcant, he said, voice low. Yes? We will discuss relevance later. You have been discussing nothing efficiently for weeks. I improved the pace. Elara pressed both hands over her mouth. Cassian's mouth curved. The council saw it. Every last one of them. For once, he let them. By morning, Varric's household had been searched, 3 clerks had confessed, and 2 fleeing guards had been caught because ravens were difficult to outrun when motivated by scandal. Lady Seraphine left for her aunt's estate with admirable speed. Councilwoman Marrow opened the old records of raven listeners, and no one in the palace used the word witch again where Elara could hear it. Elara moved from the servants' attic to a small chamber beneath the North Tower rookery. It had a narrow bed, a writing desk, a smoking hearth, and a window overlooking the black roofs of the palace. It was more space than she had ever had to herself. She stood in the middle of it, holding her old laundry apron. Brenna had cried when Elara left the laundry, though she pretended it was soap in her eye. The head laundress had given Elara 2 extra blankets, and the stern instruction not to let nobles make her forget how to mend her own hems. Elara had promised. Now the tower ravens muttered outside her window like a gossiping court of their own. She is standing still again, one raven said. Humans do that when feelings are too large, another answered. Does she have food? A third asked. Morcant's voice cut through them all. The king is coming. Elara turned before the knock. Cassian stood in the doorway, with a covered basket in one hand and Morcant on his shoulder. No cloak excuse, no linen inventory, no window inspection, just Cassian. May I come in? He asked. The question did something to her. Kings did not need permission. This one asked anyway. Yes. He entered and looked around the room as if assessing a border fort. The hearth smokes. Only when the wind comes wrong. I will have it repaired. Of course you will, Morcant said. He has already ordered it. He brought food to appear less overbearing. The basket contains bread, cheese, sugared pears, and the little cakes you looked at during the feast, but did not take. Elara looked at the basket. Cassian looked at Morcant. I see we are still speaking without restraint. We? I speak beautifully. Elara took the basket because her hands needed something to do. Thank you. Cassian's gaze moved to the apron in her hand. Do you miss it? The laundry? The certainty of it. She looked down at the worn gray cloth. It had been ugly, rough, and safe. A little. He nodded as if that answer deserved respect. I don't miss being invisible, she said after a moment. But I knew how to do it. You should not have had to. No. But knowing how kept me alive. He came to stand beside the window, leaving careful space between them. Below, the palace glowed with evening lamps. The kingdom looked peaceful from above. Elara knew better now. Peace was not a state. It was work. It was listening for cracks before they became collapses. Do you regret telling them? Cassian asked. No. Even after what they called you? Elara considered it honestly. I thought hearing birds made me alone. It turns out silence did that. Morcant went quiet on Cassian's shoulder. Cassian looked at her then, not like a king rewarding service, but like someone who had been given a truth and knew to handle it carefully. I have spent years letting the council believe distance was strength, he said. If no one could reach me, no one could use what mattered against me. That sounds lonely. It was efficient. That is not a denial. His mouth moved. No. The wind pushed against the tower window. Ravens shifted outside, black shapes settling in the last light. When Morcant said what he said in the council chamber, Cassian began, that you love me loudly, terribly, and with no strategy, his ears went slightly red. It was the most astonishing thing Elara had seen all week, including a raven dropping treason evidence on a council table. Morcant leaned toward her. The redness means truth. I know, she said before she could stop herself. Cassian's brows rose. Elara closed her eyes for 1 second. I mean, I assumed. She did not assume, Morcant said. She is observant. This is why I chose her. You chose me? Cassian asked. Eventually. You were attached to the position. Elara laughed softly. Cassian watched her, and this time there was no counsel, no accusation, no reason to pretend he had come about curtains. The warmth in his eyes was unguarded enough to make her breath catch. He was not wrong, Cassian said. Elara's laughter faded. About loving you, he said. He was imprecise about strategy. I did have one. Morcant cawed. Walking past laundry yards is not strategy. It was a beginning. It was a tragedy with boots. Elara pressed her lips together, but her smile escaped anyway. Cassian stepped closer, slowly enough that she could move away if she wanted. She did not. I do not want you to think what happened today obligates you to anything, he said. A title, a room, my protection. None of it is a bargain for your affection. I know. Do you? She looked up at him. You stopped in the hall when I asked you to. You let me answer Varich myself. You stood beside me after I had already won. Yes, Cassian. I know. It was the first time she had said his name without the title. The room changed around it. His hand lifted, paused, then brushed a loose strand of hair back from her cheek. The touch was light, careful, almost reverent. Elara, who had spent years making sure she needed very little, discovered suddenly that she wanted to lean into it. So she did. His breath left him slowly. Morcant made a strangled noise. At last, I have aged significantly. Ravens live a long time, Elara murmured. Not long enough for this courtship. Cassian's thumb rested near her temple. Should I apologize to him? Never, Elara said. It will encourage him. Cassian laughed. The sound filled the little tower room, low and real. Outside, one of the ravens answered with a croak. Then another. Soon the whole rookery was making small, satisfied noises, as if the tower itself had been waiting for the king to remember how to laugh. For the first time in her life, the voices did not feel like a burden pressing in from every side. They felt like company. Annoying company, certainly. Hungry, opinionated, shameless company. But company. Cassian followed her gaze to the window. Are they speaking? I'll always. What do they say? Elara listened. The ravens outside argued over crumbs, wind direction, Varich's poor hiding skills, and whether sugared pears counted as bird food. She smiled. Many things. Tell me one. Morcant lifted his beak. Tell him I require official compensation for saving the crown, improving his romantic prospects, and retrieving your ribbon with exemplary foresight. He wants compensation, Elara said. Cassian's expression was solemn. For what services? Saving the crown, improving your romantic prospects, and stealing my ribbon. I did not steal, Morcant said. I facilitated. Do not encourage him, Elara said again. But she was laughing, and Cassian was smiling, and the little room beneath the rookery seemed warmer than any place made of black stone had a right to be. Later, after the basket had been opened and Morcant had been denied a sugared pear twice before stealing one anyway, Elara and Cassian stood together at the tower window. His hand found hers. Not dramatically. Not as a declaration before a council. Simply fingers sliding around hers in the quiet after a long day, warm and certain. Below them, Blackthorn Palace carried on. Guards changed watch. Kitchen smoke rose. Somewhere in the lower yard, the laundry lines snapped in the wind. Elara thought of the girl she had been, listening to a trapped starling in a chimney and learning that truth could frighten people. She thought of years spent swallowing every strange thing she heard. She thought of Morcant landing on the laundry wall with her stolen ribbon and a king's secret in his beak. "I used to think the birds made me strange," she said. Cassian's thumb moved once over her knuckles. "And now?" Morcant settled on the sill, feathers sleek with satisfaction. "Now she is employed, housed, admired, and finally using her talents under proper raven supervision." Elara smiled into the dark glass, where her reflection stood beside Cassian's. "Now," she said, "I think they were the first voices that led me home." Cassian looked down at her, and the expression on his face had nothing to do with crowns or councils. "Then I am grateful to every one of them." "You should be," Morcant said. "Especially me." Cassian leaned closer and kissed Elara's forehead. It was gentle, warm, and without performance. A promise small enough to fit inside a quiet room and large enough to change the shape of everything. Elara closed her eyes. Outside, the ravens tucked their heads beneath their wings, one by one, settling into the tower that no longer felt cold. Morcant remained awake longest, of course. "Good," he murmured, more softly than usual. "The king has found his listener." Elara heard him. So did Cassian, when she told him. And together, with the palace below and the night wrapped around the tower, they listened until even the ravens slept. If this story grabbed your heart, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell so you never miss our next story. We post new stories every day. We'll see you in the next one.